Coming to you from Kansas City, Missouri, this is GovLove, a podcast about local government. I'm Lauren Palmer, the Director of Local Government Services for the Mid-America Regional Council, and your host for this episode. GovLove is produced by ELGL, the Engaging Local Government Leaders Network. The best way to support ELGL is to become a member. Check out elgl.org for information on member perks and affordable rates for individuals and organizations. And be sure to register for the most engaging local government conference of the year, hashtag ELGL22 in Phoenix, Arizona on October 13 and 14.
This podcast is brought to you by Whisper, the digital communication platform that's changing the game for local governments. Whisper makes it easy to boost community engagement and keep citizens informed through SMS, email, social media, voice messaging, and more, all from the one platform. Better yet, it's easy to use and requires no technical skills. To find out more, head to whisper.com. That's WHISPIR.com.
Today, I'm visiting with Layne Marshall, a biologist with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency's Trash-Free Waters program, and Julie Patton Lawson, the former director of the Washington, D.C. Mayor's Office of the Clean City, and now a workforce program analyst at the D.C. Department of Energy and Environment. We are talking about an education campaign they led to help residents make behavioral changes to reduce unintentional municipal trash leakage into water systems. Layne and Julie, thanks for joining GovLove to talk a little trash today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah, very pleased that you could both join us. So we are going to start with a lightning round to get to know both of you a little bit better. And Julie, I'm going to start with you. What is a food that you hate but most people enjoy?
I'm going to make a lot of enemies here and say bacon.
Whoa. You know, I think that I've had a guest say bacon before, but yes, that's definitely a very controversial answer. Do you want to tell us more about that?
Well, I'm pescatarian and I haven't eaten pork since I was about 10 years old, so pretty easy to write that one off.
Yeah, all right. Layne, what about you? What's a food that you hate that most people enjoy?
Hopefully mine isn't nearly as controversial. I am not a fan of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches.
Oh, okay. I've got a lot of follow-up questions here. So is it just the peanut butter and jelly combo, or do you dislike peanut butter and also dislike jelly?
I think peanut butter belongs in cookies, and jelly/jam does not belong anywhere near me.
So like no jelly, like not even on a biscuit or a piece of toast?
No. Also not a sauce fan, so that kind of is part of that as well.
Okay. Yeah, that's starting to make more sense now. So, okay, this isn't that controversial. Really, your answer here is like jelly. Peanut butter's okay in the right context.
Sure. I still wouldn't eat a peanut butter sandwich, though.
Now, what about, I'm about to tap into something that's really important to a lot of GovLove listeners. What about peanut butter M&Ms?
Oh, okay. Love that.
Okay. All right. We're cool then. We can proceed with the interview. Yeah. Great. All right. Both of you, of course, are located in the DC area for your careers. So I'm curious, what is your favorite monument or landmark in our nation's capital? Layne, do you want to go first for this one?
Sure. My favorite is the FDR Memorial on the south side of the Tidal Basin.
Oh, very nice. Tell us why you love that one.
It has good quotes. There's waterfalls. It's really good in the spring for cherry blossoms. Far less busy than the rest of the mall.
Yeah, very nice. Julie, what about you?
Well, I picked the National Arboretum and very specifically the conifer section.
Okay, tell us more about that. Of all the times I've been to Washington, D.C., I don't think I've ever been to the National Arboretum, so I'm taking this as a recommendation.
It's a beautiful public space, lots and lots of different kinds of trees, both native and global representation. Overlooks the Anacostia River, which is passion driving my career. And the conifer section is just a lot of beautiful pine and other evergreen trees and shrubs in a nice meandering path. And next to a stand of cedar trees. It's really quiet in the corner. People don't really go there to that side of it. It's just a nice place to sit and think for a little while.
That sounds really awesome. You're painting a lovely picture. In the new world of remote and digital working, I'm literally sitting in like a soundproof pod right now to do this podcast. So the thought of some trees and an arboretum is really lovely and kind of made my afternoon. Thanks for sharing that. Okay, and then one more question for both of you. We're sticking with our theme today, and I'm running the risk of dating myself with this question, but I would love to know for each of you, which of the 5 superpowers would you most want to have if you were a Planeteer with Captain Planet? Julie, why don't you go first?
I admit I had to look them up. I think I was a little after my time, but I am going to go with Power of Heart.
Power of Heart. Okay. So that's interesting. You said you had to look it up, and I'm sure we have some listeners who are not familiar with Captain Planet and the Planeteers, and this will be their chance to also go and Google it. But great cartoon from back in the day that really emphasized and promoted all the themes of sustainability that local gov people love. And so, there were these Planeteers that their powers combined created Captain Planet. And one of them, as you mentioned, is Heart. So tell me why you picked that one.
I think given that they are all about sustainability, picking earth or water would have been logical or the easy choice. But, even relating to the project we're about to talk about, so much of environmental work is about people and their own passions and motivations and interests. And so being able to have that heart-to-heart connection with people is really the most important part to me in our sustainability efforts.
Awesome. Very well said. Layne, what about you? What is the Planeteer that you most relate with?
I picked the same one, but mine were for far more selfish reasons. I have always wanted to be able to speak to animals, which is what you can do with that power. And you can also do mind control, which would be convenient.
Oh, gosh. Good one, both of you. I'm so glad you picked that because I had kind of forgotten about Heart being one of the Planeteer superpowers. So, listeners, if you're not familiar with Captain Planet and the Planeteers, look it up. And for our listeners who are familiar with this show and watched it often in childhood, please do not send me hate email because you have the theme song in your head for the rest of the week. Good luck getting that out. Okay, now we are going to move forward and get into the heart of our interview. So we want to get to know each of you a little bit better, just more about your professional background and the work that you're doing. So Layne, we're going to start with you. Tell us about the Trash Free Waters program at EPA. And of course, EPA is a federal program. We'd love for you to highlight the ways that your work intersects with local government.
Great. Yeah, so the Trash Free Waters program is part of the Office of Water at the EPA, and we are voluntary and non-statutory, meaning in order to reduce the amount of trash getting into our waterways and oceans, we collaborate with partners to do so. And so oftentimes that includes state and local government, also NGOs, business and industry, academia, and all other sectors. So we work to implement projects in communities across the nation in typically 5 different project types. First is trash capture and removal cleanups. Then there's source reduction, which is helping encourage the switch away from single use. Research, which has largely been around microplastics and tire particles. Stormwater, which is the largest nexus for how our trash gets into our waterways, and then, of course, education and outreach.
Okay, this sounds like really important work. So tell me about your career path. How did you get into your current role?
I have always been interested in environmental issues since I was a preschooler. So I studied natural resource conservation in undergrad in Florida, and then I went to Duke's Nicholas School to study environmental policy. In my master's project, which is kind of like a group thesis, was trying to understand why people use single-use plastics and how to encourage them to switch to reusables. So I think that experience is what helped land my job at the EPA, where I started as an ORISE back in 2019 and became a full-time employee in January.
What did you say you started in 2019 as an ORISE?
Yeah, so it's a research fellowship program. There's different fellows at all the federal agencies.
Okay, I think government nerds might be familiar with like the Presidential Management Fellowship. Is that akin to that for environmentalists?
Yes, very similar.
Okay, taught me something new. Thank you. So Julie, we'll turn to you. Tell us about the previous role that you had with the Mayor's Office of the Clean City. Tell us about the mission of that office.
Yeah, so the office was established about 24 years ago to connect the work of a number of district agencies that touch trash, whether that's collection or pollution or procurement for businesses. What kinds of materials are they getting? And to also respond to community concerns around trash and litter. The biggest highlight program is called Adopt a Block. And in the 4 years that I was there, we grew that program by 400%, where people commit from the community that they're going to clean up trash on a couple of blocks that are near and dear to them, at least 4 times a year. And we have people everywhere from an individual who cares a lot to schools and scout groups and faith institutions, businesses, civic associations, and surprisingly, a lot of car and motorcycle clubs also find this as a good social service activity. So that was a lot of fun to work within government, but also with all of our community members on dealing with a lot of the trash that's in our neighborhoods. And it took me out of the role of thinking about trash as a water pollution issue and more of a neighborhood quality of life issue and all of the different ways that people come to trash as part of their lives.
It sounds like you all were doing some really impressive work, but I really picked up when you said car and motorcycle clubs as being resources to help with neighborhood trash removal. Like, how did you figure out that connection?
So when people sign up to participate, they all get a sign hung on the block that they've adopted that advertises who they are. And so, I didn't recruit them, but I came in and was learning about the organizations that participate and found a number of them. It's one way that they get together in addition to showing off their rides.
Yeah. Okay, listeners, if you're running a neighborhood cleanup program in your community, start calling around to the car clubs. Great lead. All right. So Julie, tell us about your career path. How did you get into the mayor's office? And then tell us about the work that you're doing now.
Yeah. Mayor Bowser recruited me to come join her team after seeing the work that I had done with a nonprofit that I had founded about 10 years ago called Trash Free Maryland, with the goal of that organization is to reduce trash pollution, both in the water and in neighborhoods, through legislation and behavior change. So working at the state and local level, sort of as a lobbyist for the environment, to get laws passed related to single-use plastic bags, polystyrene, foam food serviceware, microbeads in personal care products. One of my favorite projects in that role was running the largest citizen science survey of microplastics in the Chesapeake Bay, which collected 60 samples across the bay in the summer of 2015. And all 60 samples had microplastics in them. So really, it helped us drive home the point that this is not just a faraway ocean issue, that this is in our local waters too. So I did that work, joined the mayor's office, and then for the past year, I've been working with our Department of Energy and Environment as a liaison, or I call relationship manager, with our public education systems, both DC public schools and with the University of the District of Columbia, which is our public university here, a historically Black university and a land-grant institution. It's a strong sustainability mission. So it's a lot of fun to work on helping kids learn more about the environment get access to job opportunities and further training, and then get through college to go off into careers that we're going to need for a sustainable future in the district.
Very cool. Well, you both have very impressive backgrounds and have done some incredible work. Julie, I would love to hear more about your research project in Chesapeake Bay and the work that you're doing with young people in workforce development, but those will be other podcasts on other days. Today, we're really excited to talk to you more about this project that you all partnered on with the EPA, worked with the mayor's office on what you called the Curbside Disposal Education Campaign pilot project. So Layne, I'm going to let you tell us the purpose of that pilot project and how did you come up with this idea?
So the primary goal of the curbside pilot project was to reduce unintentional leakage associated with curbside trash collection by educating residents about proper waste containment. And back in 2020, when we started this project, I was a resident of a typical DC row house, and I looked over into my backyard, which was the alleyway, and it was constantly littered with all kinds of trash that was unintentionally spilled during, putting out your bin once or twice a week. And so this spurred me to research how big of a contributor this was to the larger marine litter issue. And thankfully, because the Trash and Waters team is very entrepreneurial, my boss let me take on this project. And so my next step was coming up with a list of potential partners. So I looked for cities that were already trying to investigate this problem and realized that DC was already a leader and had a ton of existing effort around this, like Trash Free DC, Not in My DC, Adopt a Block program that Julie mentioned. So I reached out to Julie and her colleagues in the DPW and Department of Energy and Environment, and we agreed to get started.
That's great. So, you talked about your personal experience with your backyard. I'd love to just hear more about your early research of kind of diagnosing this problem of leakage from municipal trash. Before I let you answer, I'll just kind of give you my local government perspective. I think local governments are very attuned to issues around litter and municipal waste that isn't contained properly, but maybe aren't thinking as much about potential impacts on clean water. So I just want to give you the opportunity to elaborate of how you kind of drew that connection and diagnosed municipal waste as being part of the problem.
Yeah, firsthand experience is one of those, but one of the things that I constantly struggle with the idea of littering is that a lot of people think that people do it on purpose, but the large majority of littering is because of someone who puts trash on top of an already full bin, and then, wind or rain comes and picks it up and takes it down into a stormwater drain and out into the ocean eventually. So I think there's a lot of miscommunication about the sources of where this trash comes from. And a lot of these people, like my neighbors and even myself, are trying our best, but we might not realize the extent to which our personal impact has on it. So what we tried to do here was just outline really simple behavioral things that anyone could take on to help reduce their potential impact.
Okay. And so the heart of the campaign were these stickers that you developed that went on bins. So tell us more about that. What's the messaging for the stickers and how did you ensure that it would be effective?
Yes, so our slogan we ended up deciding on is cleaner communities and waterways start here. And then on the sticker, it said that slogan, and then it had an arrow pointing to a trash bin. And then on the right side of the sticker, we had 4 behavioral recommendations. The first was to keep your lid closed and to not overfill your can. The second was to bag your trash before putting it in the can, which is required by DC. The third was to place your trash in your can outside shortly before pickup. And the fourth was to use the DC 311 hotline for can repair and replacement. And so we started with a much longer list of potential actions that a resident could take on to reduce their leakage, but we partnered with the National Environmental Education Foundation, NEEF, for the first part of this project, and obviously they're experts in effective education, so they helped narrow us down to make things super clear and concise. And we also tried to follow the basic principles of something called community-based social marketing, or CBSM.
Julie, how did you select the neighborhoods for the initial pilot project?
Great question. DC has about 700,000 residents, and our Department of Public Works only collects trash from residences of 3 units or under. So if your apartment building has 4 apartments in it, you have to hire a private trash hauler. So we were looking for, because we knew this project would involve a lot of walking, that we wanted compact areas where we would have a high density of these DPW serviced homes, because they were our audience. We were not going to touch the multifamily apartment buildings and larger buildings. And because this was an evaluation of the public service, not the private contractors. We also saw with this kind of density that minor changes in behavior related to trash, like a couple of people improving their disposal practices, could have a really significant impact on one alley just because of the number of people there, as opposed to a neighborhood where people were more spread out. So we ended up choosing 4 neighborhoods that ended up being relatively mixed socioeconomically. So we had Brightwood up in the northern part of the city, and then Parkview and Columbia Heights sort of in the center, Trinidad on the just west of the Anacostia River, and then Rosedale, which was a little bit south of Trinidad. So nice dense areas where we could map out our routes for observation, as well as easily reach everybody to distribute the stickers.
And you mentioned that there was a lot of walking involved, which factored into your neighborhood selection. So explain the outreach strategies that you use to distribute the materials.
Yeah, so we had, in addition to the sticker, we had a postcard that went with it that sort of explained why we were doing this, because obviously we couldn't put all that extra background information on the sticker itself. So we were doing this pilot with 8,000 homes, and which is about, DPW services about 100,000 of our properties in the district, so about 8 to 10% of our properties. And because it was during the pandemic, we couldn't go knock on doors and have interactions with people. So this was taking the sticker and the postcard and dropping it at the 8,000 doors through these 4 neighborhoods, which we accomplished in a week with a team of about 8. I personally distributed about 1,800 of them, and I think I blew up my Fitbit pretty early that week.
Have you considered a future in elected office? Because it sounds like you would make a great door-to-door knocker come campaign season.
Also have a much greater appreciation for all of our delivery personnel and the number of stairs that DC grow houses have from the sidewalk to the front door.
Yeah.
On top of that outreach work, we also walked each neighborhood every week for 6 months as part of the evaluation. So it was a mile per neighborhood for 2 of us to do. So got a lot of exercise that way too.
Yeah, it's a great segue. I wanted to ask you to explain your methodology for measuring success of the pilot project. And it was like literally boots on the ground. So tell us more about that.
Yeah, a lot of DC's trash work is based on visual trash surveys. You know, we established regulations on the Anacostia River based on literal counts of trash that people observed. And there's a pretty standard system, at least in the East Coast cities that I've worked in, of counting litter levels in neighborhoods on a scale of 1 to 4, where 1 is almost no litter, could be picked up very quickly by one person, and 4 is we need to call in the professionals, and then 2 and 3 is somewhere in the middle. So we started 10 to 12 weeks before distribution of the stickers, walking this route through each neighborhood and evaluating every block for their litter level and tracking it in a spreadsheet, and then also making note of major problems and trash cans that were displaying various incorrect behaviors like overflowing or lids open. And then after the distribution, continued that for another 12 weeks. So that allowed for Layne's team to go back and analyze where did we see improvements. We also made use of a lot of data that the district government already collects and used so that sanitation enforcement citations from or calls into that 311 service center, where in both of those cases, we could look at not only before and after, but changes within those target blocks relative to the entirety of DC. So were we seeing changes before and after because of seasons, or were we seeing an actual change in these specific blocks? And then on top of that, we did some couple of focus groups to get more of a qualitative impression from residents in the target areas, which allowed us to get a lot more other information about government services and residents' impressions of our local environment and other issues that are important to our local government colleagues.
Yeah, great. I'm really impressed by the huge outreach component of this project. So, Layne, I'm going to ask you to kind of boil it down for us. What does it all mean? What were the key results from the measurements that Julie and her team collected in the field?
Yeah, so we used a couple of different analyses to try to figure out the exact impact of the campaign, one of which was a differences in differences analysis, which we used to account for any changes between the target and control groups prior to treatment, aka sticker distribution, so that we could accurately determine the effect of the actual sticker. And so after that, we decided that although the improvements tended to be small to moderate, our analysis suggests that the program did have an overall positive impact. In fact, we measured against 16 different metrics, and 13 of those we found improvements. So that includes a statistically significant reduction in the number of overflowing cans and the number of overflowing and open cans combined across all 4 of those target neighborhoods. Julie mentioned the service request extra complementary analysis to try to get at our sticker and recommendation number 4. And the number of 311 service request submissions in the target neighborhoods increased after sticker distribution by 2.2 degrees of change and 9.2 degrees of change for sanitation enforcement, which we're hoping was maybe spurred by the fact that after people were educated about proper waste disposal, they felt more comfortable reporting improper disposal from their neighborhoods. 109 stickers were observed along the routes, meaning 10.6% of households actually applied the sticker to their can. But that's actually probably way higher because if people were actually following the sticker, they were hiding their cans, aka putting it in their proper spot and not in the alleyway where Julie would be able to count it. So there's lots of different nuanced metrics coming out of it, but we do think that we had a very decent reach rate compared to other district canvassing efforts, especially in the middle of COVID. And there was definitely a positive impact of our work in these 4 target neighborhoods.
Great. In our conversations to prepare for this interview, you mentioned some observations about illegal dumping of bulk items. Could you share that and how that influenced your program takeaways?
Yeah, so Julie and her colleague Lorena discovered that dumping of bulk debris, especially associated with home cleaning and move out and foreclosure, was a significant problem. Like discarded furniture, like mattresses and sofas, often piled up in alleyways, in some instances for a couple weeks before it was eventually, alerted to the DC DPW. But we know that litter attracts more litter, and so I'm assuming that illegal dumping of bulk waste could be contributing to the overall litter levels in particular alleyways as well. And if we had known that it would be such a significant contributor, I think we probably would have included something specific to illegal dumping on the sticker itself to educate residents about bulk collection options that DC provides.
Yeah, Julie, anything that you want to add just based on your observations or any strategies the city has tried to combat bulk item illegal dumping?
The district has been putting signs up in certain areas that are hotspots saying no dumping. It doesn't apply in any of these neighborhoods, but the district has a really successful program called Dump Busters, where there's a motion-activated camera in known hotspots where it captures the vehicle information and the action as it happens, which has led to more than 200 arrests for illegal dumpers and even reducing the behavior itself. As Layne said, where we saw items dumped in an alley, the longer it sat there, the larger the pile got. Particularly, I noticed it with electronics because they can't be picked up in a typical trash truck because they have to be recycled. So those will sit longer until they can get picked up by the special electronics truck. And then people will add non-electronics to the pile as well. But there's one alley since this project that I've actually done some more additional work on, including repaving it. And we've seen the illegal dumping drop significantly there just because of the changed site design. I'll say blocks that were the cleanest, had renovated alleys. They'd been repaved. And also residents had taken the time to build a cubby in their fence where the trash cans live. A place for everything keeps things tidier. They had a cutout on their property to keep the trash cans in, and those were always spick and span.
Interesting. Yeah. So I want to give each of you a chance to kind of make a closing statement. Julie, we'll start with you. Just what advice do you have for communities that might be interested in replicating some portion of the work that you've done? One of the reasons I wanted to talk to you in this interview is because it's a really universal common theme that I think every community in the country deals with, big or small, urban, rural. Everybody has to deal with trash. So just any insights that you have for our listeners about where they could start if they want to replicate any of the strategies of your pilot project.
Absolutely. We tried really hard to be thoughtful about the methodology, with the purpose being that we wanted other jurisdictions to either trust that they could just replicate that methodology, or that we could find parts of it that we would have changed to make it better so that new jurisdictions can actually improve upon it. So we were very deliberate in the project design in that respect. I would say things that I might change would be to do those initial observations, start them before you develop your messaging, because as we've alluded to a little bit, there are things that we may have wanted to include that turned out to be bigger contributors to the problem that we didn't think about when designing the message. Also, I think copy what we did and think about what data your city already collects to help you with the analysis rather than having to come up with it. A lot of projects stall out because you either didn't collect the before or you never go back for the after. But if you're already collecting that data anyway, it's going to be easier to do that comparison. My third piece of advice is don't do it during a global pandemic.
Well, you did it.
We did.
And got great results.
I just don't recommend doing that part again. It adds a lot of additional complicating factors.
Understand. Layne, what about you? Any advice for our listeners?
It sounds like Julie and I had a lot of the same ideas and big takeaways coming out of the project. But other than what she already mentioned, speaking of Julie, you should find someone like her who is dedicated, on-the-ground partner, Julie was critical to determining which neighborhoods we, rolled this out in, doing the weekly data collection, speaking at neighborhood commission meetings, conducting the focus groups, everything. So you need someone as committed as her on the ground to help roll this out. And definitely take a look at our case study report, which is on the EPA Trash and Waters website and also on the DC Mayor's Office of Clean City website. It provides a super comprehensive overview of our methodology and lessons learned and other recommendations.
Well, that is awesome. Thanks, Layne, for sharing those nice comments about Julie. That's really what GovLove is all about, just having the opportunity to shine a spotlight on the great public servants who are out there in local government doing good work day in, day out to improve our communities. So it's nice to see Julie get that shout out. And Layne, thanks for being a great partner at the federal level and the work that you do and partnering with local communities to make projects like this happen. Is there anything else that either of you want to share about this program before we wrap up?
I have one note. I think it's okay to start small. Like if you notice in your community that one apartment complex is like a repeat offender or a certain neighborhood might have more of a littering issue, maybe start there, start small, learn and improve on that.
Awesome. Great sentiment to wrap us up. Start somewhere, start small, but make a difference. Well, thanks so much to both of you for joining the GovLove podcast. As we wrap up, Layne, if you could be the GovLove DJ, what song would you pick as our exit music for this episode? And I really hope it's the theme song to Captain Planet and the Planeteers.
Sorry to disappoint.
Yes, I think you have something else. Go ahead.
Julie and I are in agreement that it should be Sesame Street's Oscar the Grouch, I Love Trash.
Oh, another great pick. And, another throwback to our childhoods that's going to remind us why we all do the work that we do in local government. I think that's a very good one. All right, that ends our episode for today. Thanks so much to our guests, Layne Marshall and Julie Patton Lawson. Thank you for listening. If you have questions or ideas for future podcast episodes, you can reach us at elgl.org/govlove or on Twitter at GovLove Podcast. This has been GovLove, a podcast about local government.
Because it's trash. Oh, I love trash. Anything dirty or dingy or dusty. Anything ragged or rotten or rusty. Yes,